Hey guys, welcome back to this channel. And for today's video, we're going to create a new full stack programming. So let's start. For our full stack development, we're going to need the following. For our backend, we're going to use Laravel. And for our supporting database, I'm going to use PostgreSQL. And also, with our front end, we're going to use React with Redux-Toolkit. So now, without any further ado, let's begin. Before we proceed with our full stack, let us discuss first the requirements for our development. Now, the first one is we're going to need PHP. So just for this demo, I'll be using the example. Now, currently, the version of PHP for this example is version 8.2.4. So this is the latest PHP as of the time of this recording. So next to that, added to this one, we're going to need a composer. Now, for our composer, you can simply download that by searching the Google or simply type Composer. So see here. So head on the download section and download the right platform for your PC. So we're going to need a Composer since we're doing a Laravel programming. Okay. So similar to Git, this one, or rather similar to Node.js. So Composer is an application that dedicates for PHP. So if we're using Node, which is the NPM, so Composer is similar to that, but they use Composer. Okay, so that's the next one. Now, another requirements as well is we're going to install the Postgres. Now, for our Postgres, so if you're using Windows, this calls for Postgres. Okay, here, this section. So during this time of recording, I'm using Postgres 16. Now, by selecting this PG admin, it will take you to this section. Now, don't worry for those first timer. Uh, this is easy to install. If you're using Windows, just simply download the application by searching postgres.org. Okay, so from here, you're going to select the platforms needed. Or if you're using Linux or Mac, so simply head on the download section and select the right platform for your operating system. So these are the things that basically that suits for your platform. Okay, so just pick from any from this list here. Now, once installed, you will notice that this is basically similar to the typical database. The only difference is that the location. So here, they use the term schema for tables. Okay, so since if you're using MySQL or SQL Server, so that's different from the typical terms they use. So this is one of the things that you can consider uh, difference, I think. So so if you think there's so much thing we can do with Postgres. So this is one of those. Okay, so don't need to explore more about Postgres. The very bottom line here is we're going to create the system that will connect to this database. Notice here, I already create my own database. So for now, I'm going to delete this one. Okay, so I'm going to create a new database for our demo. So for my demo, I'm going to create a new database by selecting this section here, or simply right click and select create database. Now, similar to our previous demo, I'm still going to use the name of the database, which is the MyDB. Okay, so that to avoid confuse of many names that we are using. So since this Docker series. So I'm going to be consistent with every detail, like the database and the tables. So we're going to use the same tables as is. Okay, so next, just click save. Okay, good. So once you have these uh, tables now or database, so we can say that you're all set. So from this point here, we're ready now on the programming development. So let's start, right? So from here, let's start by creating a new folder, and we're going to name this as project FullStack. Now, using your editor, just simply open that. Okay, so still, since we're doing a full stack, I'm going to create two folders in here. So the first one is the API, and the other one is app. So API or the server, while the app is the client. Okay, so anyway, so you can name that whatever you like. So still, I'm going just going to use the same concept as what we did from our last video. So API should be the back end, and the app is the front end. Now for our API, since we're using Laravel for this one, so I think it would be best to focus on the back end first before we proceed on the front end. Okay, so for now, we can close this one, and I'm going to focus only this section, the API. Okay, so from here, we can now create our Laravel. So let's start. To start with Laravel, simply type the following by typing composer space create hyphen project space Laravel slash Laravel. Now, at the end of this line, we need to indicate a period, so which means we're going to use this current location. Then press enter. So once done, let us type the following. To run this code, simply type php artisan serve. Right. Now to view this on your browser, just simply click this link by pressing Control and with your left mouse. And there you go. All right. So our Laravel is ready. So at this point here, we can now proceed on the next step. On our next step, let us set up now the configuration to connect with our backend. Now, let's step over to our code. All right. So from here, head over to the .env. Now, since we're using Postgres, but first we need to scan again our Postgres. So notice here, we're using MyDB as the name of our database. So for now, this database don't have a data. If we're going to check here under public and tables, there's no tables yet for this one. Now, the good thing with Laravel, it auto creates whatever database that you're going to use during the creation. Now, to modify that, under this section .env, locate the section where to connect. Now, from here, definitely this area here. So, what are the things that we need to check or change? So, first, we need to define the connection. So, from here, we'll be using the Postgres. So, that will be PGSQL. Okay. Now, for the host, it should be, right? We're going to use this default one. Now, for the port, Postgres is using 5432. Okay, so that's the port uses for Postgres. Now, next, for our database, we'll be using the MyDB. Okay, so that's the name of the database that we created earlier. Now, for the username and password, by default, username is Postgres. Okay, so that's the default name or the default username for our Postgres. Now for the password, depending on how you set up your password, just make sure you take note on that. So just for this demo, I'm going to paste my password during my earlier creation. All right, so save that. Okay, so that's the first one. Now there's another things that we need to modify as well. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to modify also the database default. So to do that, let's head over to the app, config, and database. Okay. So right now, okay. So right now, as you can see, the default is MySQL. So we're going to change the default as well. Now, to do that, let's type or replace this one by typing PGSQL. Okay. So these are the things that you need to consider. Okay. So before we're going to proceed on the migration, let me discuss some few things from here. Doing this so will require you to change something on your PHP. Now, since this is a different setup and not the typical MySQL, so make sure you modify some from the PHP admin. So let's say if you're using exam, from exam, you're going to configure the PHP ini. Okay. Now, there's a few things here that you need to activate. The very main section is by looking or searching for the particular extension. Now, to find that extension, better to say to type PGSQL, okay? Then click Find Next. Okay, so here's one of that. Okay, this one. So the first one is you need to make sure that this extension is enabled by removing this code like that. So this indicates this is a comment. Now, by removing that the semicolon, it will state that this is active. Now, the second one, actually, it's down here, this one. So this is also another thing that you need to debate. So these are the things required for our Postgres to communicate with our PHP. All right. So once you're done setting up here, we can proceed now on the migration. So let's work on that. Similar to any ORM that you know, like sample the SQLize in JavaScript or the Node. In Laravel, they have also their specialized or the built-in ORM. Now, using the ORM, this will help you to generate the tables without doing any manual intervention. So that's the good thing of using ORM. Okay, so to apply that in our Laravel, simply head on the root section. Okay, so if you're, let's say, in our API, so better select it somewhere outside here, then right click, open an integrated terminal. Now, the requirements for this one, make sure you are on the root section. Now, to begin generating our ORM or for the migration, simply type the following like that. So this is the key for them to activate this type of thing. Now, we're going to activate two of these, and the very basic one is generating the model. Now, model serves as the table or the schema. So this will help us build our model within our Laravel. Now, to call that, by typing make PHP artisan make model, we're going to define the type of model. Now, since I've been doing this for the entire series, safe to say, we're going to use the movie table as our primary table for this operation. So just specify the hyphen M. Okay. Now, right now, we're planning to create a model for movie. So this will generate the table. Now, once you have this one, just press enter. There you go. So once you see this section here that says created successfully, this indicates that your model was already created. Now to check that, head over to the app. Then from here, under this models folder, and there you go. So see here, the movie.php. Okay. So this is where we set up our table. Okay. Now to complete this one, we're going to modify the field requirements for our table. So for now, we don't have yet the tables available in our database. So while waiting for the next creation, we're going to add now these columns. So what are these columns? So by typing protect or protected, we're going to assign the $sign fillable. Okay. So we have two columns only for this demo. So if you recall, I always use the title and the description. Okay. So these are the only two columns that we always do during this entire series. So make sure you emphasize the colon or the semicolon. So this will serve as the closing section in PHP. So that's one of it. Now next, okay. So besides from these models, there's also a auto creation waiting for that to execute. Now, if you scan here under this database inside this APP, notice this last section here or last file inside the migration. If you click that, you may see this migration file that indicates or saying the name of your table. So this is the table that we're going to create. So this is compiled within the make model. So to fill this up, okay, to fill this up, you need to specify again those columns and their respective data types. So let's start with that. So by copying this one here, we're going to specify the first column and we're going to assign that as string, and that column is the title. Okay, then let's copy one more, and this one should be the description. All right. Okay, so these are the things needed for our movies to create. Okay, so but before that, I'm going to explain things. Now, since we're doing some migrations, the app function here indicates that once we do the migration, this will automatically create. Now, if you happens to have a bugs or errors or something happens along the process, you can simply reverse this section or by assigning this one here. So if something goes wrong from this section here, you can simply reverse that by calling this operation. All right. So that's the use of the migration file. Now to run that, simply type the following by typing php artisan migrate. Okay. By typing this command, this will automatically create the tables that were assigned in this section. Now, since this is our first time to call the migration, take note, there's also other migration file here. So not only our files will be created, also this migration file here as well. Okay? So but for now, I'm going to make a separate series for this one. So just leave it as is. This is a default from Laravel. So let's proceed now on the migration. So by pressing enter, and there you go. So all those files content with the migration will be automatically executed. Now take note, this only can do or execute once. It doesn't matter of how many models or migration file you have, but during the creation, it will only allow or execute once. Now to check our table, head over to our PD admin. Okay, so from here, for now, we don't have the table here. So if once we refresh that, there you go. So from here, you may see those tables that we mentioned earlier. Now, but I think much better to focus on the movies. Okay, there you go. So notice here, okay, better we need to open this one. Okay, good. So notice here, okay, since we're already set this up, so automatically there's no manual intervention during the migration. So this is one thing or one of the best thing when using an ORM. Now you can achieve that in many ways, not only Laravel, but there's also a lot of ORM right now available online, especially if you're working with Node.js. In our earlier days, I already discussed some of those, but don't worry. On the in the future demo or tutorial, I'm going to discuss back again with the enhanced features. So this is one that you can achieve also in Laravel. Okay, so that's how it works with migration file or the migration. Okay, good. So that's one thing that we can learn from doing migration without learning more about Postgres. Okay, so that's one of it. Okay, so now we're done with the models. The next thing that we need to do now is to create a controller. So let's work on that. So let's clear this up. Okay, so for us to create the controllers, we need to take the name of the models. So basically, the format for creating the controllers is based on what operation that you're going to do. So since container or the controllers serves as the container of that certain operation, we can simply say that since we're working with Mubi, so Mubi will be the centralized for this particular controller. So that's basically what it does for controller. Now, if you're a beginner, you can say that controller is the execution part. So this is where the operation takes place. Okay. Now, to work with controllers, we simply type this following line. By typing PHP artisan make, we're going to specify the operation by typing controller. Okay. Now, for our controllers, we're going to set a specific name for this one. Now, the format for this controller is make sure you are written that in singular form or singular. So notice when we create the models, we always started with singular type of name. So, but during creation, it will convert into plural, just like this one. Okay. So for our controllers, we're going to name this as movie controller. Okay. So this is how we format things. Now, once you set up your controller, just hit enter and there you go. Now, what it does is it will create directly to our app. So if you're in this section, it should be falls under controllers. Okay. Now, notice here. So this is the section where our controllers were created. Now, on the long run, there is a term called MVC. So MVC stands for the models, view, and controller. Now, for this demo, we're only focusing on the controllers and the models. Simply because since we're doing a full stack programming or development, so we're going to take off the views from the back end so that we can fully utilize the front end as our view. Okay, so that's the extent for that. Now that we have our controllers, we can begin now with our operation. For our first function, we're going to create a REST API. And to start with, let's create a read all data from our tables. So let's work on that. Start with, let us import first our models. So to import our models, head over to this section here. And we're going to use app slash models slash and the name of the models. So this is the movie. Okay. Next, we're going to import that movies to our function. And for our function, let's call by typing public function. And the name of our function, we're going to set this to index. So which means this is the starting point of this controller. Now to get or call our models, we simply import that to our variables. And for that variables, I'm going to name this as this. And then let's bring down our models. Okay. Now there's a weird way on how to break that in Laravel. If you are using the typical dot, in Laravel they use this double colon here. So this is the version of their dot. Now maybe because this is only applicable to this particular object. So that's how they process this one. Now, after we call or import our tables with all those details, in return, same goes, we're going to type the return and response. So this is a similar way on how we look with Node. Now from here, we're going to present that as JSON. Now to call our JSON, simply follow this format by typing JSON. Okay. Now there are two things from here that we need to consider. So the first one here within this section here, which is an object. So we can specify more information since this is a JSON. Now at the end of this section here, this indicate the type of response. Since we're returning a success or a successfully response, safe to say we're going to use the default 200. So that's the commonly used. And then for our object here, since we're assigning a multiple display, it will be best to send that or set that in this manner. So first, I'm going to allow a success. Then emphasize this arrow, which is equal version to the typical that we know. And for that value, we're going to assign the value. So let's say for this one, I'm going to assign to true. And then I'm going to add one more in columns, which is the message. And then from here, okay, for this message, we can say that let's say I'm going to name this as all or fetch all movies. Okay, so yeah, so that's the way or on how to return a response from a JSON. Now let's close that with a curly braces or semicolon. All right, so we have a small error here. So to fix that one, make sure you enclose everything with semicolon like this, and then save, just like that. Next, okay, so notice here, the error is already gone. Now next, since we already have this an array of messages, now the next thing we need to do now is to import or bring down this declared variable. Let's copy that. And then we're going to add that in this next line, and we're going to assign that to a column named data. Okay, so that's where should we place the value. Okay, so that's basically what we need for now, just for this get all. So all right, So feel free to pause and copy this small code. Now, the next thing we need to do now is to import this function to our routes. So let's move to that. So let's proceed to the routes. So from here, head over to the route section, this one, then select api.php. Okay. Now, to call that controllers, we need to import that first by typing use app http controllers and the name of the controllers, which is the movie controller. All right. Now, to apply our routes, okay, so maybe some in this section here. Now, to apply that, let's call this function route, and then just follow this double colon, and then let's apply the request, which is the get. Now, for this URL, I'm going to assign that to /movies. And then let's open a object here in this section. And then next, let's call the controllers by typing movie controller. And then let's specify the class. Now for our class, if you recall, we named that to index. So let's copy this one. There you go. Okay. So once you have this one, we can simply close this down. Okay, good. So this is how we set up our routes for our controller. So feel free to pause and copy this code. Okay. Now to test these routes, make sure your project is running. Okay. So there you go. Now to test this on our browser, let's open the link. I simply press Control and left mouse click. Okay. For now, we have this section here. So to call that routes, simply type /API. So this is the base URL. And then let's call now the routes that were assigned to our movies, which is the /movies. Okay, then press enter. And there you go. So for now, we don't have the data yet. So let's proceed on the creation part. So from here, let's minimize this browser. Then let's head back to our movie controller. Okay, so now we managed to complete the index. The next thing we need to do now is for the function to save our data. Now let's begin by typing public. And then from our public, let's call our function. And we're going to name this as store. Now, basically, similar to what we did from the node, we're going to assign the requests. And then in Laravel, we need to assign that to a variable. So this is a request and assign to a variable request. Okay, so that's how they assign a function or an object to a request. Now next, so from here, there are a few things that we need to do first before store our data. Now, in Laravel, you need to validate that. Now, to validate the data, simply type validated data equals to the properties. Now, if we are assigning a value, okay, so remember that we have only two columns, which is the title and description. Now, to, to verify that, we need to bring down the requests, okay? And then, let's apply this function validate, okay? So, we're going to assign that in an object. Now, within this one here, we need to assign a validation. So the first one is we need to assign the validation for the first column. If you recall, we named that as title. Okay, and then we specify the requirements for this one. So this is mandatory. So we're going to assign this as required. And very important, we need to specify that this is a string. Okay. Now, since since we required a string, so same goes, we're going to copy this section. Same goes to our next column, which is the description. Okay. So from here, we require that section to be called or assigned to a string as well. Okay. Then let's close that. Okay. So this is the first thing that we're going to do for this function. Now let's assign a variable named movie. Then let's bring down our schema, which is the movie. And then from here, we assign the function create. Okay. So similar to what we did in our node, we assign this value create. Now let's bring down this validated data. So this is how it works or how they do in Laravel. So they see to it that the value that you're going to pass later on is compatible with their column itself. Now, let's return this value by typing return. Okay, so similar, let's apply the response. And we're going to format that to JSON. Okay, so similar to what we did earlier, so I suppose we're going to follow the format along with this one here. So safe to say, we can copy this one. Okay, so the only difference here is this message. So we're going to name this as created successfully. And for the data, let's replace this one to movie. And then let's close this up. Okay, so let's review as why this one has an error. Oh, unexpected return. Okay, here. So make sure you close this as well. There you go. All right, so that's all we need for our stored function. So next, we're going to import this now to our routes. So let's proceed to that. Okay, so from API, so from our routes, so we can say, we can copy this one here, and then let's replace this with post. Now for our function or the URL, I'm going to name this as create hyphen movie. Okay, so that's okay. So basically that's what we need. Now in here, let's replace these to store. Okay, good. So now, to test this request, let's open that to our under client. Okay, okay, good. So this is my earlier test. We can use this one. So basically, this is how we apply our request. Now, but first, we need to specify the request method, which is the post, and the base URL, which is this one, and the name of the function, which is the create movie. Okay, so let's use this one. Now, by clicking send, there you go. So notice here, this one works perfectly. So let's hop over to our browser and reload our page. And there you go. Okay, so this one is working. Okay, good. So next, after we made our create function, the next thing we need to do now is the update. So let's proceed to that. So let's hop over to our controllers. Okay, so from here, we can copy this one. Okay, from here, let's rename this to update. Now, in our parameters, let's add one more, and we're going to name this as $ID. Okay, now, whenever we create an update, we always situate that we're checking the primary key, which is the ID. So in every CRUD operation or REST API, we situate that we use that primary key to easy search and modify. Okay, so this is why we update or apply also the ID same in Laravel. Now next, similar to what we did in our store, we need to validate that. So to add it to that, so since we already have two parameters, we need to evaluate one by one. So the first one is the validation for this request. So we can copy the validation from store. Okay. And next, let's have a validation for the ID. Now ID is different because we're going to search that in our tables. Okay. So, but first, I'm going to assign this to a variable named movie. And then let's bring down our schema. And from here, let's apply this function find. And this is where our ID will be validated. Okay. Okay. So from here, let's assign that to if condition. Okay. So the first thing we need to do now is to assign this return or this object. If this indicates were found, we're going to assign that to a specific column. Now the first column is the title. Okay. Now to save the value for this one, we need to apply the validation. Now, safe to say, we can simply remove this one. And let's bring this request down to this section here. Okay, so that's how we evaluate things. And then from here, we're going to assign the input value. And for that value, we assign that to title. Okay, so pretty much that's all we need for this one. So the next one is similar goes. We can copy that and place here. And we're going to evaluate also the description. Okay, so from here, once everything in place, we can simply call now the function update by typing movie, and this we're going to apply now or call the update. Okay, so this will automatically update once all the requirements are satisfied. Now this can be achieved in many ways. Just for this demo, we're going to do it in this manner. Okay, once you found it in online, there are so many bunch of how to perform this. Others use the condition wherein they use the schema condition like the movie, like this one. Others they say they use this like this, that wherein like something like that, and then they apply the condition, and then from there they also assign the validation. So just to break down the process, this method is just a way of understanding how things evaluate line by line. Okay, so now that we have our condition completed, so this is how we update. The next thing we need to do now is to return the response. Safe to say, we can copy this one and assign it here. And then let's replace this message to updated successfully. And for the variables, make sure you bring down the variables, which is this one. Okay, so ensure that you close everything in here. All right, so that's it. So whenever you have a code line, emphasize to close that with semicolon. So that's it, guys. That's all for the update function. So with this, let's upload or import this now to our routes. Let's proceed to that. Okay, so let's proceed to our routes. We can copy this line here. Now the difference now is instead of using post, I'll be using put this time. Now, if you recall from my earlier demo, I always use patch. Now, just for this demo, I'll be using put. So either way, they perform the same. So from here, I'm going to replace this to update movie. Now, the only added definition here is the ID. Now, to call that ID, simply assign that with curly braces and label that as ID. And for our class, replace this with update. Okay, so that's all we need for our update. Now to test this one, let's head over to our under client. But first, I want to add more for our entry. So right now we have this one piece, and I want to add one more. And let's add the UU, this one, the latest movie as of this time, the Yu Yu Hakusho. Okay, so let's add this one so that we have a lot of records to play with. Okay, so let's view that. Okay, so what Okay, good. So what we're going to do now is, since we have now a little bit more data here, so let's modify one from this thing here. So let's say I'm going to update this latest entry. So for that to work, let's head over to our other client and create a new request. Now I already prepared that request, okay, just to simplify things. Now let's say this one. So for that ID, I'll be using this ID2. Okay, same. I'm going to copy this one. So but first need to replace these two so that we are aware that we're updating the second record. And I'm going to maintain the title. Same goes with the definition or the description. So oops, let's say I'm going to add one more here. So a Netflix adaptation in 2023. Okay, so only this line only. So see if that works by clicking send. Oh, so not found. Okay, simply because we changed the routes here. So let's head back to our routes and replace that with this one. Okay, so let's go back now to our other client. Okay, here. So let's replace these movies to update movie. Okay, so let's try this now. There you go. Okay, so that works. So let's check also the browser, and there you go. So that's all we need for our update requests. So next, after the update, let's proceed on the last part, which is the delete. So let's work on that. So for our delete, let's head over to our movie controller. Okay, so from here, okay, we can simply copy everything from our update. Let's copy that. Okay, so from here, let's rename this to destroy. Okay, so same goes. We're going to use the same parameter. Now, the only difference is that we won't be needed anymore this validation. Okay, so since there are no more validation, safe to say, we can remove this section here. And then from here, we can apply now the delete. Okay, so that's all we need for deletion. Now, added to that, let's add a caption saying deleted successfully. Let's say that. So basically, that's all we need for our delete function. So now, let's proceed now to the routes. Now for the routes, let's copy this one. Okay, so just use the delete request, and then let's apply these routes to delete movie, and then let's replace this plus here to destroy. All right, so that's all we need for our routes. Now to test this once more, let's head over to our under client. Okay, so I'll be using my earlier example. Now, by replacing this section here to this one, So by replacing this one to that one, to delete movie, we are requesting that routes, this entire routes to or to delete requests. Okay. Now let's review again our example. Now for that example, I'm going to delete this last record. So let's try that one. Okay. So make sure you emphasize this ID here. So that's the ID. Now to test that one. Okay. So to test that one, let's click send, and there you go. Now to check our browser. All right. So same goes. So that's it, guys. That's all for deletion. Now that we're done on our backend, this time, let's move now to our front end. So stay tuned.